I read 25 self-pub books in 2022, and this video is going to be talking about my favorites. Since the end of 2021, I've been ranking every fantasy and sci-fi novel I read out of 100 points. And the books I'm going to be talking about today, they all scored 80 or above. Not to put that in perspective, The Lost Metal by Brandon Sanderson scored 79, so it would not make it on this list. So that should give you some type of guide for how much I enjoyed these self-pub books. Now the first on that list is going to be Dragon Mage by M.L. Spencer. And first, absolutely beautiful naked hardback. I think this is my favorite cover of all my books. But the story itself is also phenomenal. It feels very much like a classic coming-of-age fantasy novel, but often in this story it subverted my expectations, and I liked what she did with the protagonist. The next book on the list, I'm actually going to cheat a little bit and show the whole series. It's going to be Forging Hephaestus and Bones of the Past by Drew Hayes. These are books 1 and 2 of the Villains Code, which the Villains Code is a superhero fantasy series, but it's told, not so surprisingly, from the villain's point of view. Now, if you want to know more, I do have a review up for Forging Hephaestus, which I will link in the cards. And it should come as no surprise to anyone who's been watching my channel and following along that Drew Hayes made this list. I've loved everything he's written, and he'll end up making the list for 2023 as well. Now, the next book is also a superhero fantasy, or more specifically, a superhero space opera. And that is Wistful Ascending by J.C.M. Byrne. This is book 1 of the Hybrid Helix series. It's kind of like if Superman was living on a Mars colony with a bunch of humans who several of them knew that he had these special powers, but he didn't want to be treated any differently than anyone else. So he's not going out and constantly being a hero, but at the same time, he's not going to not step in when there's a situation in front of him. So he's kind of running from his past a bit, but his past isn't going to let him go that easily. Next book is completely different. That's going to be His Ragged Company by Rance D. Denton. This is a fantasy western where the first half of the book feels like it's just a western. And the reason for that is you're following Faust. He is the marshal of this small town, I think it's Black Peak in Texas, and there's nothing fantastical about him. He doesn't have access to magic and doesn't think there's such a thing as magic. So anytime he sees something magical in the first half of the book, he kind of overlooks it or pretends like he's seeing things or just doesn't really believe that what he's seeing is actually what's happening. And since he's not seeing it, you're not seeing it for the first half of the book. And that happens until he can't deny what's going on any longer. And at that point, the magic just comes flooding in and hits you like a tidal wave. I can promise that if you pick up His Ragged Company, it'll be like no other book you've ever read. And I highly recommend the audiobook. The narrator, John Perhala, did a fantastic job with the accents and really bringing the world to life. Now, the next book on the list ended up being my book of the year for 2022, and that is The Legend of Blackjack by A.R. Witham. I have gifted this book to more people than any other book I've ever read, which is quite surprising when you consider it's a YA portal fantasy. That would have been the definition of a book I wouldn't pick up. But I was in a slump, reached out to my friend Andrew at Andrew's Wizardly Reads saying, hey, I need a book to read. Tell me what I can get through. And he recommended this book. Fantastic recommendation. I couldn't put it down. I think I finished the book in 2 days. It was just so much fun. Pirates, ninjas, knights, talking magical rhinoceroses, technology versus magic. This has it all. Right, the next book was one of the first self-pub books I've ever read. That's Winds of Strife by U.G. Gutman. This is another one with an absolutely beautiful cover. You gotta love the blue, the black, the white. It's hard to go wrong on the cover when you put those colors together and you have colors in motion. It just works really well. This book is unique in that the main protagonist is trying for a good cause, but he's not a good person. He does a lot of horrible things in order to accomplish what he views as an overall good. Now, one thing I did like is it's not just a ripoff of the typical for the greater good, and that's why he's doing everything. He truly is a pretty bad person, but he wants a good thing to happen. Now, his motives aren't necessarily the best, but his objective is a good one. And then the magic system is based off of emotions, which was one of the coolest magic systems I've read, and it made the fight scenes that much more interesting because in order to fully use the magic system, you have to be able to control your emotions, which is really hard to do when you're in the middle of a battle. And now the last book I'm going to talk about is Of Darkness and Light by Ryan Cahill. This is book 2 of The Bound and the Broken. Now, I kind of feel like a broken record because I've said this several times. I wasn't the biggest fan of the first book, of Blood and Fire. I thought it followed Eragon's storyline way too closely. But I could see at the time that he was laying the groundwork and had woven some threads into the story that gave it potential to leave the Eragon outline. And I said that if he could do that in book 2, it would be a phenomenal book because his writing was exceptional and he nailed it. Of Darkness and Light did not remind me of Eragon at all. The writing was still phenomenal and it was just such a great story. I love a lot of action in my novels, and a lot of times when you have a massive book like this one, you got to get through 80% of the book before you get to some good action scenes. It's all world building and just laying the groundwork for everything, and then you just have nonstop action for the last 20%. That was not the case in Of Darkness and Light. You get dropped into a battle scene right at the beginning, and then from there, the group gets separated, and you have multiple point of views throughout the story. In a lot of ways, it reminded me of a Stormlight Archive book in how well he was able to maintain multiple POVs and have you interested in all of them, and action and suspense and tension woven throughout the story, and just constantly keeping you entertained and never having a lull in any of the POVs that you follow. So this was, I think, my highest rated book from last year. And from what I hear with Of War and Ruin, book 3, the early reviews are that it's just as good, if not better, than Of Darkness and Light. And if that's the case, this series is going to start to rival Stormlight Archive for my favorite series of all time. And I almost forgot, there is actually one more book. Unfortunately, I don't own a physical copy of this book because I can't find a way to affordably purchase it in the US, and that's The Iron Crown by L.L. McRae. This is book 1 of the Dragon Spirits series. The book starts off with the main character basically having no idea who he is. Can't remember any of his old friends or family, or if he had any friends or family. Doesn't know where he's at or how he gets there. And throughout the book, he's trying to figure that piece of information out. Often when I'm starting a new series, it takes me quite a bit of time to really get into it. It will usually require some type of action scene or a long built-up tension for me to get to the point of, I can't put this down. That was not the case at all with The Iron Crown. I was immediately intrigued. I honestly can't think of another series that I was as invested early on as I was with The Iron Crown. So if you're looking to get into some self-pub novels, these 8 are a great place to start. And until next time, bye.